Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Nightmares Nightly. Last year, I interviewed a man in our town as part of a project for my journalism class. He was infamous in our town because of a gruesome crime that took place in the 90s. Though the police had determined that he had no involvement, the townsfolk never entirely bought into that conclusion. Though it's been decades since everything went down, time never stopped folks from talking, nor did it stem the tide of urban legends and the commonly shared warning that parents always gave to their kids. Never approach the old man's farm past the hill. He's always waiting for young kids to kill. It was a cheesy way to remind us not to go to the Garrison farm, but the funny thing about cheesy sayings is that they have a way of sticking in your head. The craziest thing about all of this was that people always found ways to blame bad things on the old man, even back in the central part of town. Missing dog? Old man Garrison. Power outage? Old man Garrison must have done it. Well, the kids at school even found ways to involve Garrison in your run-of-the-mill school rumors. Despite the town's apparent fear and hatred of the man, he was a part of daily life. And I think that's what fascinated me so much about him. Growing up, I'd always wondered exactly who the man was as a person and how he felt about his name being synonymous with evil. I got my chance when I went to college and started my journalism major. One of our assignments was to interview someone we found interesting and write up a mock article on the person. Immediately, Old Man Garrison came to mind. Soon after I got my assignment, I managed to contact one of his family members. Eventually, I was able to set up a meeting at a coffee shop back in my hometown. It ended up being the most disturbing conversation I've ever had in my life. I just finished transcribing the audio from the conversation not too long ago. I think it would be irresponsible not to share what was said with the people of my hometown and the rest of the world. So, without any further backstory, here's what was said. Hello, Mr. Garrison. I really appreciate the fact that you came out. My name is Thomas. I had used a fake name. And I spoke to your nephew about asking you a few questions. Yeah, I remember. What did you want to ask? I made a note here that the first thing you notice is how pale the man was. For a moment, I thought the balding man was wearing makeup, but what really caught my attention as I spoke were his eyes. For lack of a better word, they seemed dead. The whole conversation, he looked through me, as if I was never there to begin with. He spoke in a slow, emotionless, and methodical manner. The combination of the way he looked at me and talked to me made me feel uneasy. Mostly about the incident. I'm just gonna repeat what happened for the record so that the audience who isn't aware of the case can be caught up to speed. Alright. In 1987, 5 boys were found buried on your family farms, and police say that their faces have been disfigured beyond recognition. It appeared as though amateur surgical procedures were done to them. I'm not gonna go into great detail, but each of the bodies had parts that were removed, stitched up, or severed entirely. Obviously, the boys being found on your property made you the prime suspect. However, your sister has provided a rock-solid alibi, and there was a noticeable lack of evidence, so you were subsequently crossed off as a suspect. Is all that correct? Yeah. Okay, I suppose for the first question, I wanted to ask, do you remember anything weird leading up to when the bodies were found? Did you maybe see someone scouting the area? Or maybe did you see the boys hanging out around the farm? I saw them from time to time. I warned the boys to stay away from my property. I told them that my property wasn't right for hanging out at. I found it very disrespectful. That's fair. I can see how you would have been frustrated with them. Did it ever get confrontational? I wouldn't call it much of a confrontation, but I was glad that they were gone afterward. Oh? What happened? I don't want to get into that. No problem. What was the investigation like? If I remember correctly, your sister died a few months after the trial, too, right? That must have been a stressful year for you. I wouldn't say stressed. I found myself relatively calm. As for my sister, her death was manageable emotionally. Manageable? Can you elaborate on that? Your sister dies, and you're not an emotional wreck? If I recall correctly, she died in a pretty horrific car fire. Some people even suspected foul play. No, death is commonplace. Some people who are around death often have no need to attach anything significant to the event. Have you been around death a lot? I didn't say I haven't. This is when I really started to fear Mr. Garrison. This guy was as cold as could be when talking about his dead sister. I don't know what it was, but there was no way he was just like this. Something has to have happened in Mr. Garrison's life that made him like this, and frankly, I wasn't sure if I wanted to find out what that was. Well, I guess that's a good segue into my next question. People around the town have kind of made you synonymous with bad things, almost like your very name is an omen of bad things to come. Have you heard the rumors, and how do you feel about them if you have? I have heard the rumors. If the townspeople want to fear me, then so be it. If my work is to be feared, then I understand. I will say this, though. I don't involve myself where I don't need to be involved. I've never once caused mayhem in town for the sake of being some kind of villain. That's good to know, but your work? What kind of work? And why would it be feared? That's not to be understood by everyone. Did your work involve the boys? They involved themselves in something. They didn't need to be there, and yet they were. Sometimes, life just plays out like that. Note, now I'm getting very suspicious. I feel like I'm close to something, and I felt like I had to dig deeper, so I ended up going off script from what I originally wanted to ask. Mr. Garrison, did you kill those boys? Kill is a vague term. It degrades the value of what happened to them. They became a part of something greater. It served two purposes, eliminating a nuisance and feeding into something purer. Regardless of how I felt, what happened to them needed to happen. Mr. Garrison, you're not really answering my question. It's also a little weird how the only person who could actually account for where you were can't change their story now. I don't disagree, but what's done is done. Life goes on, yeah? Not for them. And what could be done about that? How does one stop death? Boy, I've lived here for a very long time. I see and hear things that go on around town that would be national news. The horrific nature of life is just a harsh truth that many people are too ignorant to consider. What do you mean? I mean that if such things happen in a small town like ours, then there's no doubt that atrocities are taking place in large quantities elsewhere, yeah? Why fight human nature? Some people chose to embrace their inner selves as simply as you embrace your love for caffeine, or as you embrace going on late-night walks around your school. How did you? Because information is important. Most of the time, I choose not to use that information in any significant way, just as I've chosen to respect your false name. But when someone involves themselves where they shouldn't be involved, then I have to respond in kind. Note, at this point I'm absolutely terrified. As small as my town was, this guy knew me. I've never been near his farm, and yet he knew me. I figured it was in my best interest to cut the interview short before I dug into something I really didn't want to get involved in. You know what? I think I have everything I need. Thank you for your time, Mr. Garrison. Sure. Any plans for the rest of the day? No. He pauses for a minute, stood up, and flashed me a wide yellow smile. I think I'll go murdering. From there, he walks out, and I never saw him again. Later that night, I got a bunch of text messages listing the addresses of where my friends and family lived, with pictures of them outside their homes. As much as I wanted to call the police, I had this feeling in the pit of my stomach that the minute I did that, he'd show up at my house and put a bullet in my head. The best I could do was warn the people close to me about a stalker and just to be on the lookout. That conversation remains the most unnerving I've had in my entire life, and I still don't know what my response should be. Is it too late to go to the cops? I've come to terms with him hurting me, but would I be putting people I care about in danger? I don't know. You might be wondering why I'm even sharing all of this. It's not just because I came across the tape and thought it'd be interesting to share. No. Last week I came home to visit. After a great night of catching up with family and old friends, I went to my room and tried to get comfortable, but something just didn't feel right. Call it intuition, but something told me to check the window. And as I do, I see an old man standing on the other side of the street with a shotgun, flashing a big, yellow smile. Thanks for listening, everybody. And if you like what I'm doing, leave a like and a comment down below, and hit that subscribe button for more Nightmares Nightly.